Welcome, crazed beach people, to Geek Salad's Retro Movie Review from the Geek Salad Podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Mike.
And we are continuing our Oscars through the decades look back at Best Pictures of the Past. Last week, we were in the 30s, and we covered 1934's Did It Again. It Happened One Night. Tonight, we start the 1940s with the winner for Best Picture of 1940, winner of
It's
two
One for Life.
Academy Awards, which was Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca.
The only one that got him an Oscar.
He never actually won a competitive Oscar.
Well, I mean, for a movie he directed.
It was the only movie he ever directed that won Best Picture. He lost the Oscar to John Ford for The Grapes of Wrath. Well, John Ford was a heavy hitter. It's funny to think that this is really kind of somewhat the beginning of Hitchcock's career,
which is interesting because, like, beyond this, I think I've seen The Hitcher. I know I've seen The Birds and Psycho. I think that's pretty much it for Hitchcock that I've seen.
Okay.
And so far, this is probably my least favorite of his.
It definitely is different. You could tell that he was not yet the master of his craft that he would be. One of my favorite movies of all time is Rear Window.
Oh wait, no, I've seen Rear Window as well.
I love Rear Window.
That is
my
really
favorite out of all of them.
Yeah,
very good. This one is it's interesting because it's almost like it was he was just a hired gun for this movie. But he was able to bring a little bit of that sensibility in.
Yeah,
I feel like this isn't as suspenseful as some other movies, but you can see that there are hallmarks of his later works.
Yeah,
just kind of kept to a lower volume.
Honestly, I felt more of the suspensefulness, what there was of it, in like the latter half of it.
Yeah, this movie boils like a teapot. It does take a long time to get there, but when it does get there, you realize everything that came into place. I was thinking about it tonight. I watched the movie close to a week ago, and I was thinking about it tonight, and I'm like, oh. So the entire thing is we've always, when we set up the story here about Manderley and the tragedy of Rebecca, and it never occurred to me until tonight that Danvers is actually not trying to harm Mrs. De Winter at all. She's using her because she blames Maxim for the death of Rebecca. And we'll get into the subtext later. Yeah. She blames Maxim for the death of Rebecca, and she's going to use his new wife as a pawn. I always thought it was like she resented Mrs. De Winter, which, by the way, she does not have a first name. Her first name is never mentioned.
That's straight from the book, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's never mentioned.
Brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant because it dehumanizes her in a way where she can be used as an unwitting pawn. I mean,
I will say I do think that Danvers does wish her harm because, sorry, I forgot to mute the phone.
Wasn't me.
Because she does try and get her to kill herself.
She does.
And she gets pretty darn close.
Right. But again, it's in service of doing Maxim harm. Everything is in service of doing Maxim harm.
Because she does know that Maxim does care for his new wife.
Yes. Yeah. And it was kind of funny because there's very little, they don't have great chemistry.
No.
I don't believe that Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier have great chemistry in this movie. No. There's very little that made me believe that up until the courtroom scene, there was a lot there that I never really bought them as a couple until then, when they're sitting in the car and he's just assuring her that everything's going to be all right.
Yeah,
Then
that
it was like, okay, where was this earlier?
Yeah. By the way, I'd only seen Sir Laurence Olivier like when he was older.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was younger, I can see why he was like such a heartthrob, because he was actually not a bad looking man. I think
He was a very good looking man. It's funny because we watched a video on these scandals of the musical of Rebecca. Great story
I
about
didn't realize
how
they made a musical.
yeah, the capsule of that is there was a musical that was made in Germany, and it was a big hit. They wanted to bring it over to the U.S. They would need to bring it to Broadway, and with anything in Broadway, you need backers, you need investors. They shored up investment, but the problem was the investor didn't exist.
Ooh.
It was like they were taking finder's fees and leaving them in the lurch. So it was cast. There were promotional tours that were going on, but they never staged for an audience. They never staged this to a U.S. audience.
Sounds like they was just like kind of grab the money and run.
It really was, and it was just like they were playing small potatoes because they were leaving them on the lurch for investors that actually would have the type of capital to put down for a Broadway musical. It's a very interesting story. It's check out the channel Waiting in the Wings. It's there. It's really interesting. But back to this movie. The reason I brought that up was because when they were showing clips from the movie, Laurence Olivier comes on screen and the guy was like, "Oh yeah." But I will say, I thought Joan Fontaine there's just something so old Hollywood glamorous about her. She was beautiful in this.
And I didn't realize until I was looking it up earlier, she's the younger sister of Olivia de Havilland.
Yeah.
And I looked up an image of Olivia, and yeah, you can tell they were sisters. They look
you look at them
similar.
Yeah, I mean it's funny for me to think about now because I primarily know Olivia de Havilland as like the crazy old lady and not not like from Gone with the Wind. I mean, even when you think of her in her later roles, like in The Heiress, she's dowdy, very, very blah. But yeah, Joan Fontaine in this movie is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, it's just funny because we're coming back to back on two black and white movies here. And I feel like the cinematography in this movie was some of the best black and white photography I've ever seen. Because it shined. It radiated.
That was the second Oscar that this movie won. It was best cinematography.
Yeah, and it earned it. It looks so good. It doesn't look. It's like I said, it shines. There's a lot more bright gray in there than blacks and whites.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely loved about this movie. There's a lot of things I like about this movie. I'm gonna pull up in a minute. I'll pull up the what it was up against that year.
I like this movie more to look at than to actually watch. Because I mean, when you're talking about a Hitchcock movie, you think of those tense thrillers, and this one, like the first half of the movie, I felt was a lot more awkward than tense or.
A lot of it was like they were stumbling towards the they were stumbling towards their plot because all we know is dead wife.
Yeah.
Dead wife, new wife. Here's Manderley. Yeah. Here's my beautiful palace that you are now going to live in.
Yeah, it really wasn't until I think the ball, the costume ball, that's kind of the transition point.
Yes. Absolutely, because that's when we begin to think that maybe Maximus is mad.
Yeah.
And there's a lot at play there. And I also feel like the end was a little rushed. The end resolution that Rebecca, spoilers, folks, but the movie is 80 years old.
1940. Yeah.
83 years old. So I You know, when they reveal that Rebecca had cancer.
Yeah.
Um,
and late stage cancer, sounds like.
Yeah, late stage cancer. There was nothing she could have done.
Yeah.
So, but there was a lot of great interplay. You know, again, in that second half of the movie, when we're introduced to Lavelle.
Yeah.
Oh my God, George Sanders was so good in that.
He is so slimy and just. Ugh.
Well, it's great too because I mean, he was a fantastic actor, and he was able to use that voice to his advantage. I mean, he was Shere Khan, for God's sakes.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't really connect to it.
Yeah, and he won an Oscar 10 years later for All About Eve. Fantastic actor, and that really worked really, really well. What I liked too was a lot of the subtext, because you know, you brought this up, and I mentioned I was thinking the same thing about how we're pretty sure that Danvers was either in love with Rebecca or they were already lovers.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like bringing Lavelle in there, it's almost not so much like a love triangle, but he may have been, because I mean, let's be honest, he comes across as a bit of a dandy. He's probably just trying to, you know, kind of shield the world from his true identity, you know. And then it's like, take that, Hays Code.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I don't think there was any kind of love triangle, but you know, they laid it out. Rebecca was playing the field. Rebecca was sleeping with anyone she wanted to.
Yeah, she didn't love Max at all.
No, so in fact, if there was one person that Rebecca probably didn't sleep with, it was probably Maxim.
Probably, as evidenced by the fact when, you know, she said that she was pregnant and he knew.
Yeah.
Doubt it was not his,
because he absolutely hated her. So there's no way he was going to sleep with her. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if when she said she was pregnant, if she was like, yeah, and Lavelle is the father.
Yeah, but at the same time, Lavelle may have also been playing Danvers too, because he was really, you know, as he was referring to her as Danny. He may have been playing her too, because he knew that in some way he was going to get this fortune. One way or another, he was going to get this fortune.
Yeah.
So, interesting little thing about Mrs. Danvers, Judith Anderson. She intentionally does not blink in any of the shots that she's in. She might avert her eyes. You do see her eyelids, is what I'm trying to say, but she doesn't blink.
She is just creepy as fuck.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it works really well. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this one. And I'll get into the who won and who lost stuff, but in just a minute. But overall, I feel like it's very much a Selznick type of film. And even at the beginning of the movie, for God's sakes. You know, you were talking about like last week, with if it happened one night, it's like you get the Columbia logo. It's like, oh, Three Stooges are coming on. And then with this one, it's like the Selznick Plantation. Is how you begin it. Yeah, exactly.
If there was one person that was getting a bigger credit than Hitchcock, it was Selznick.
And again, Hitchcock wasn't Hitchcock back then. He still wasn't the master. And that's it's great that this was the movie, for all intents and purposes, that really boosted him to that next level. And as we see in the 1950s and in the 1960s, we're going to see this string of amazing suspense and horror, and intrigue. And it's just that he needed this movie, I feel, to really make that happen.
And just a slight aside, how we had the Columbia logo, and that gave me a Three Stooges connection to the last movie. Yeah. We got a Three Stooges connection in this movie as well. The guy, the hotel manager that goes down and tells Van Hooper to go up to Maxim's room.
Yep.
He played the Stooges foil as an opera singer in the Stooges short Microphonies. 5 years after this movie came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. So let's take a look at what this movie beat for Best Picture that year, or it was still called Outstanding Production back in 1940.
Well,
So it was up against All This in Heaven 2, The Foreign Correspondent, The Grapes of Wrath, The Great Dictator, Kitty Foyle, The Letter, Long Voyage Home, Our Town, and Philadelphia Story.
Gee, I wonder which one won.
Well,
Could it be
obviously,
the
what we're
one?
talking about here.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that John Ford had won for Best Director, beating Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
But in terms of actor, so James Stewart won that year for The Philadelphia Story. Charlie Chaplin was also nominated for The Great Dictator, Henry Fonda for Grapes of Wrath, Raymond Massey for Abe Lincoln in Illinois, and Laurence Olivier was nominated.
Yeah,
Joan Fontaine was... What's that?
This one was nominated for 11 Oscars, more than any other movie this year, but only won 2.
Yeah. I mean, this is back when they really used to spread the wealth, though. Ginger Rogers won for Kitty Foyle, beating Joan Fontaine, beating Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, and Martha Scott.
Although Joan Fontaine did actually win for another Hitchcock movie, Suspicion.
Yeah. Back, again, one of those 1940s, just like dark, one word, kind of like, I would say the Suspicion is more like a British hard-boiled type of film than what Hitchcock would eventually end up doing. Like, the 1940s was definitely, we're going to do more intrigue. We're going to do more of that. Rope is another one. But these are the movies that get him started. And as we go, we just see this amazing filmography.
Yeah.
So, again, I love Alfred Hitchcock. I think his movies are fantastic. I never saw Family Plot, though, because, I don't want to see an old man write his last will and testament. But
what about Marnie?
Marnie, I don't think I've ever seen.
Huh. Like I say, I've seen.
Yeah.
I think I've seen Hitcher, but it's been a very, very long time.
Hitcher?
The Hitcher.
The Hitcher. Okay. I've seen Psycho, Rear Window, North by Northwest, Vertigo. No, there's a few more in there. Yeah. The Birds.
I've never seen North by Northwest or Vertigo, but I have seen the actual matte painting that they used in North by Northwest of Mount Rushmore. It's at
exactly. Where Martin Landau tries to kill Cary Grant.
Is at the Academy Museum out there in California.
Oh, neat.
It is so cool.
Eventually I'll have to get out there and see that. But I overall I enjoyed this movie. I feel like looking at the span of winners in the 1940s, I've enjoyed this one more than many of the others that I've seen. I'm not going to pull this up so I can actually list off what I've seen in the 1940s. And I have seen some. It's not like I haven't.
I probably have not.
Okay.
I think, though, between this one and It Happened One Night, I vastly prefer It Happened One Night.
I do too.
More fun film.
It's lighter.
Yeah.
Okay, so here are the... Let's see, can I actually get a real list here? All right, 1940, 1949. Okay. All right, so Rebecca, we've seen. All right.
There's a
lot. How did they do this? Oh, okay, I see it here. Okay, so the winner was 1941 was How Green Is My Valley. Never seen that, and that movie has only got its notoriety because it beat Citizen Kane.
I only know it. I only know about it because in the MSC3K episode Laser Blast, they make a How Green Was My Valley joke when they show Rodney McDowell.
Who was in that movie.
Yeah.
Mrs. Miniver, 1942. Haven't seen that one. All right, 1943 is Casablanca.
Oh.
And we've covered Casablanca already. All-time classic.
Well, in my top 5 movies of all time. It is so good.
It is, yeah. It's like my favorite old movie. 44, Going My Way. I have a very limited tolerance for Bing Crosby, so.
As we saw last month.
Yeah. 1945 was The Lost Weekend with Ray Milland. I haven't seen it. Seems a bit heavy. 1946, I have seen this one, The Best Years of Our Lives.
Heard of it.
Yeah, post-war, people, men just trying to get back into the swing of things after the war ends. No. Gentleman's Agreement, 1947. This is one I've been meaning to watch, and I can't find it anywhere.
Check Tubi.
Huh? I
Check
did.
Tubi.
I didn't see it there, but
really?
All right. So 48 was Hamlet, which is where Olivier wins his Oscar.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then 49 was All the King's Men, which I just watched recently, and actually was quite good. It's one of those movies that's kind of lost to time, but honestly, in our heightened political environment, it actually is worth a watch. And just watching The Cult of Personality, it's a very good movie. Also on Tubi. So overall, I enjoyed Rebecca a lot. It's not going to touch Casablanca in terms of the 1940s, but there's a lot to like about this movie. And again, it really is the jumping off point for Alfred Hitchcock. And that's really, I think, what I appreciate the most about this movie is that it really brought Alfred Hitchcock to that wider audience that he really rightly deserved.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fine movie. It's just, it's not, I would not have voted for it.
No, okay. It's kind of tough to think what I would have voted for if I were an Academy member in 1940. I probably would have gone with Chaplin. I would have gone with The Great Dictator, I think.
Yeah.
That movie's a classic.
Yeah, I'm always down for some good Chaplin. So
yeah. And this is like Chaplin at his most serious, even though it's still funny.
Yeah. Although the Three Stooges did beat him to the punch by like 6 months or so. You nasty spy.
Wow. So just that wealth of Three Stooges knowledge, Mike.
Of course, yeah. Come back next week for some more Three Stooges.
I'm sure that we'll find some somewhere. I'm sure
I'll find a way. Don't worry.
Yeah, Curly Joe Besser probably had cleared plates for Alec Guinness at some point. And I guess that means that we're talking right now about what next week's movie is going to be. Next week, we are going to be talking about Bridge on the River Kwai for the 1950s. So that'll be an interesting discussion. It's been a dog's age since I've seen that movie.
I've never seen that movie, so
okay. I mean, David Lean is kind of like the John Ford of the 1950s. So yeah. So we'll have a grand conversation there. I think it'll be a good time.
Oh, nice.
So anyway, folks, anything else you want to say about Rebecca before we close this out?
Mrs. Van Hooper is incredibly, incredibly unlikable.
Oh yeah, and I think that made it
a
lot easier for Mrs. De Winter to leave.
Yeah,
to just get the hell out of there.
I've known this guy for a week, but it's still better than her, so I'm leaving.
Yeah, exactly. He was incredibly rude to me at first.
Yeah, and every single one of her drives was incredibly awkward, waffling between happy to I don't like you, happy
I'm melancholy.
Yeah.
Should I put the top up? Is the rear projection behind you bothering you?
Yeah.
It's an unavoidable fact of of most films. They hadn't figured out how to mount a camera to a car yet. Effectively.
Which is why I'm so glad that they made fun of that in Airplane.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Anywho, that was Rebecca. We'd love to know your thoughts on that. Please leave a polite comment below. If this is your first time to Geek Salad on YouTube, please give us a subscription. Thank you for joining us. Give us the video a thumbs up. It helps us in the algorithm. Also, Mike and I host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever. Still, Mike's got a degree in the Three Stooges.
Thank you, Jonna.
Thank you, Jonna. So we do this all the time, but Mike and I do host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts, which is Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. If you are on iTunes, it's the only place that it really counts. Give us a 5-star review. Let's boost that rating up. Get our subs up. You can check us out there. Subscribe here. You can also find us on the social medias, Twitter at Geek Salad Radio, Mastodon, and 6 Degrees of Three Stooges. Okay, I got you now. Aha! Now it makes sense. We are also on Mastodon and Hive at Geek Salad Radio as well, and Facebook at Geek Salad Podcast. And until next time, I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
Go forth, be nerdful, and don't let that ceiling collapse on you. It might be on fire.
Ooh.